Hey everybody, welcome to DadsDen of Pop Culture. We're getting into games again today, role-playing games, and in particular, Gamma World Science Fantasy role-playing game, copyright 1978. This is a third printing from 1981 by James M. Ward and Gary Jaquet. I don't know if it's, I actually don't know if it's Jaquet or Jaquet. Not sure how I pronounced it. Welcome to America, where we randomly pronounce foreign names properly or completely improperly as the spirit takes us. This is a Dave Trampier cover. Now, this is not the original book that I had. I bought this one not too long ago. The one I had, though, was only in slightly better shape. You see in the back we have a hex map and the old TSR logo. So I thought we would do a flip through, talk about this game, talk about the rules, and, talk about maybe some memories I have of playing this one. Now, before I jump right into this, I do want to bring up the game that it was based upon, which is Metamorphosis Alpha. Now, this is what we would really nowadays call a facsimile edition that I bought not too long ago. The original copyright is from 1976. This is copyright 2007. So this very recent copy I own is almost 20 years old now. Oh, God, I'm old. And what Metamorphosis Alpha was it was set on, like, I guess what you could call a generation ship or a colony spaceship that was going from, say, Earth to some faraway star. And a disaster happens. And there is a radiation leak. And so everything takes place, on this giant spaceship. The people living on it don't even know that they're on a giant spaceship. And you have your humans, and you have your mutants, and you have mutated animals, etc. Okay? So this was then developed later as Gamma World. Now, Gamma World is set on planet Earth, and they do give you, in the opening, by the way, there's a foreword, of course, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places, and the kings of the earth, and every free man hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains. There followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and the cities of the nations fell. From Revelation of St. John. Okay, so we get a foreword. We get another awesome piece of artwork. One of the really great things about this book, and of course TSR at that period, was the black and white art, which I know some people go, I like the new stuff better. It's more complex. Well, yeah, I know, but there's something about this stuff where it feels like you're playing a game with a lot of friends, as opposed to, I don't know, something more corporate. I'll put it that way. And if it looks like everything just got lighter, it's because I just paused for a moment and turned on another light that I meant to turn on in the first place. So Gamma World, like I said in the introduction, gives you essentially a setting that you can play this game in. Now, you don't have to play it in this setting. It gives you enough tools to do a post-apocalyptic sci-fi game based upon, Mad Max, probably Mad Max more than almost anything, at the time. Thundarr the Barbarian, good inspiration for this. What was that old filmation? Was it Arc 1? About the folks traveling around in the big sci-fi RV, etc. You could kind of recreate one of those things, one of those settings if you want, but it does give you an actual setting and explains essentially that early in the 24th century, okay, the 2300s, in other words, some problems arise among human beings. They live wonderful, easy lives, and that's given them more time to get, shall we say, philosophical. And as a result, well, I'll read the paragraph. You can see what he's saying here. It actually sort of speaks, I think, to some of the stuff we're going through right now. Having conquered the rigors of simple survival, man was able to turn his energies to more esoteric considerations: theology, political ideology, social and cultural identification, and development of self-awareness. These pursuits were not harmful in themselves, but it soon became fashionable to identify with and support various leagues, organizations, and so-called special interest groups. With the passage of time, nearly all the groups became polarized, each expressing and impressing its views to a degree that bordered on fanaticism. Demonstrations, protests, and debates became the order of the day. Gradually, enthusiasm changed to mania, then to hatred of those who held opposing views. Outbreaks of violence became more frequent, and terrorists spread their views with guns and bombs. And so in this setting, at a certain point, you start getting more open warfare. A neutron bomb is set off to kill people from one faction. There's assassinations by that faction against the people they blame for the attack. And eventually, as it says here, in the final months of the Shadow Years, a new organization calling itself the Apocalypse announced its existence with the now famous ultimatum: "Peoples of the world, you appear bent upon the destruction of a civilization that has taken centuries to build and the extinction of life on Earth. If that is your will, so be it. We, the Apocalypse, demand an immediate cessation of this insane violence, or we will end it for you with a force you cannot conceive. We have the power. The choice is yours." And ultimately, they do use the power, and there is, something like nuclear devastation all over the world. Well, the year is now 2471. It is nearly impossible to describe the vast changes that have occurred since the devastation of the Shadow Years. And it basically then lays out this world that people live in. There's a lot of wilderness areas that were once populated by, people from the 2300s are considered, the ruins of the ancients, and they're avoided. There's pockets of humanity. There are mutants, etc. Here, in fact, we see a mutant plant reading this book. You get the bit on how to use this book, which essentially explains, how role-playing games work, because in 78, they were still pretty darn new. Suggested additional equipment: graph paper, hexagon paper, sheet protectors, notebooks, pencils and paper, imagination. One very patient referee: players, the more, the merrier. You get the bit on dice in Gamma World and how the dice work, designing Gamma World. Okay, so that's very useful, because obviously they give you the idea of a campaign setting, but it's not what you would think of, especially in later years in TSR, as a campaign setting where there are extensive maps and, everything written down for you. You don't really get that here. So you have to kind of design that yourself. And I think if memory serves, they kind of tell you, you might want to take the area that you live in and use that as your starting point. And I think that's what this was done. I think it was kind of based around, Wisconsin or so, with the campaign that was being run. But it gives you an idea of settlements, cities. There should be a minimal number of cities in Gamma World, as there are simply too few survivors, and there hasn't been time enough since the Shadow Years for any great new cities to have grown. All of the old cities either lie in radioactive ruin or have been completely obliterated or swallowed up by the rising seas. What cities there are will generally be situated on a coast or river, etc. You get the villages. There's far more of those. We got tribes. Organized semi-nomadic bands of humans called tribes wander as the land around them is used up and can no longer support their population. Bands, smaller than tribes, bands are completely nomadic groups with usually less than 100 members, about a third of which will be warriors. And you get ancient areas. Now, this is kind of interesting because remember, it's post-apocalyptic, but it's not like there was a nuclear war in the late 70s. This is set in the future. So you do get, super science, basically, mixed in with the whole post-apocalyptic thing. So you have Mechland, a robot farm. You have tombs of the ancient building. To remain after the devastation of 2322, a single building must be made of tough stuff. This type of building would be either a military installation of some sort, a structure built to withstand earthquake forces, or a scientific research building. Now that's the kind of thing that a Gamma World player wants to find, because he can find, ancient technology there. Ancient villages, ancient towns, ancient cities, ancient metropolises, fortifications. So it gives you just a thumbnail, spaceports, of course, as well, because this is set at a time when human beings had gone into space, which, of course, also creates the opportunity for maybe visitation by aliens, or maybe by returning human beings, like maybe some astronauts who come back and find out that the world is ruled by apes. You get suggestions like radioactive deserts, roads, highways, transportation, how those might work, creatures, and artifacts. After the referee has decided upon the layout of his world and filled in the necessary portions of the overall terrain map and his detailed maps, he must distribute artifacts and artifacts and equipment to appropriate places and populate this world with men and monsters, including plants. For scenario, so they do give you some tips on that as well. Now, I do have one of the published modules for Gamma World, and I'll be honest with you, I've never actually played it. I bought this not too long ago because it's in pretty good shape. Got some Willingham art on the cover. Got some Erol Otus there. And this does give you, I'm going to flip to the back here. This does give you a campaign map you can work off of, the Barony of Horn, and also, move this out of the way, the old awesome blue maps, which just, that's what maps need to look like for me when I play role-playing games. Even though you can draw much fancier looking maps nowadays, that's what I like. And apparently, from what I understand, the reason behind the blue was that it would not photocopy. So people would have to go buy the modules instead of just photocopying the maps. The fact of the matter is you could just redraw them if you had to. Okay, so now we're going to get into the game proper. And I think it is kind of interesting, though, that this one starts off with a bunch of stuff for the referee, rather than immediately going in for stuff for the players. In other words, create the world and then create characters to adventure in it. So we get creating characters. Character personae are created at the beginning of the campaign, endowed with certain basic attributes through the roll of dice. First, each player must choose to play either pure strain human, humanoid, or mutated animal-type characters. The advantages and disadvantages of each of these three categories will be explained momentarily. Having selected the type of character he wishes to play, player then rolls 3 6-sided dice to determine the relative strengths of the characters. And so here we have mental strength, intelligence, dexterity, charisma, constitution, and physical strength. So essentially mental strength is wisdom and physical strength is strength. If you're talking about D&D, you notice it is a 3-dice-6 sort of method, just like that one. And it sounds like the idea is that you're kind of rolling them, in order. Although it does say here you have where you could roll, 4-dice-6 and leave out the lowest, etc. Now, one of the fun things to me about Gamma World is actually just character creation, honestly. Because a lot more of it is sort of random, especially if you're talking about mutations and things like that. And I can remember me and a buddy of mine, just like, we probably rolled up characters more than we than we actually played the game. You just roll something up and then you try to draw it, with all of its weird mutations and make it work. We had a lot of fun just doing that. It's not exactly a game within a game like in Traveler, but it was a lot of fun. Also notice that in this game, they do not have classes like you got in D&D. So there's no fighters, magic users, thieves. You really just have your pure strain human, your humanoid, and your mutated animal. You're going to have your basic attributes, and they do explain all that stuff here. Let's see, they don't get into mutations yet at this point of what you get. Your dexterity, charisma. There's your reaction table, so very much like in D&D. Your charisma table with your maximum number of followers, morale adjustment, reaction adjustment. Remember, in old games, there was definitely an assumption you were going to have as many NPC followers as you could sort of get a hold of, because that was going to be part of how your character survived, as opposed to the more modern attitude, which is just sort of the character goes it alone and therefore has to be made quite a bit more powerful. So we get the attributes, non-player characters and creatures. So they explain what that concept is. By the way, God, I love that. And that picture is under hopeless characters. When a player is particularly unlucky with his dice rolling for his character and most or all basic attributes are below average, the referee may, at his discretion, say, yeah, it's unsuitable. But keep in mind, there was still the idea that, let's say you made a character who was pretty average with just a couple bad scores. Yeah, you're expected to play it. And that's how it goes, And that's the part of the challenge. Losing in these games, i.e. your character gets killed, was just not looked at as the worst thing that could ever happen to you. You just re-rolled. It was cool. It's fine. Don't get that, insane about your character. Okay, now here's where we get to some really cool stuff. The mutations. Physical and mental mutations for humanoids and animals are listed in chart form. When using random number selection, the chance of occurrence for any given mutation is shown alongside as a percentage. Detailed descriptions of these mutations are given in the text that follows. A D indicates that the mutation is a defect. So different percentile rolls for the human or for the animal, although they're not wildly different. But you notice like a 44% light generation, it's 42% for animal, but it's still only a 1% chance. So basically some of these things like heightened strength, 27 to 32 versus 26 to 29. So a humanoid is going to have a bigger chance. I believe that's 6% chance for heightened strength, whereas it's 4% for a mutated animal. So a little bit different. And at the bottom, roll a good mutation, no defects, pick any mutation. So 95 to 100%. Boy, that's what you wanted. That's what you wanted. So you could really, create the character you wanted to create. But think about this again. You're sort of plunging into this world, right? The idea is these are random mutations for the creatures that live in this world. And so you roll them randomly. You don't get to just build the character you want. You take what you get, and again, you try to make it work. It's part of the challenge of the game. The idea is to have fun. And Gamma World was definitely a more gonzo role-playing game than Dungeons & Dragons had to be. Although D&D could be pretty gonzo and Monty Hall if you wanted it to be. But this is kind of right off the bat. You have some wild power variations here. At any rate, you got attraction odor. That's a defect. The mutant's body secretes a substance which will attract carnivores. Don't really want that. Body structure change is another defect. Chameleon powers, density control. Remember that one dude, Buck Rogers? Remember, Buck Rogers actually also post-apocalyptic. It's a world that's been ravaged. And there was that one guy, there was like that League of Villains, that Frank Gorshin was on that episode. And the one dude could, pass through things because he could reduce his body's density so that he was like a ghost. Very cool. Diminished sense, that's a bad one. Double physical pain, that's a bad one. Electrical generation, fat cell accumulation. I think I actually have that mutation. Or it could be eating a lot of monster cereal, I'm not sure. Gas generation, Musk. No, it does not refer to Elon. Heat generation, heightened balance, heightened constitution, etc. Heightened smell, and that means sense of smell, not that you stink. That's kind of the first one. By the way, think about some of these that you could apply to the characters in Masters of the Universe. Like you could use Gamma World probably to run Masters of the Universe without any special rules, really, when you get down to it. Poured in maybe some magic stuff, and you're pretty much there. I don't necessarily want to read every single one of these. Hemophilia, increased metabolism or a couple defects, increased speed, infravision, light generation, multiple body parts, that's cool, multiple arms, something like that. New body parts, what? No resistance to bacteria would be a tough one. No resistance to poison, it's a real tough one. Shorter skin structure change, that's a defect. Regeneration allows you to heal yourself, replace lost hit points. Boy, everybody would be wanting to roll that one, no doubt about it. Quills and spines, a partial carapace. Oversized body parts, don't go there. Sonic attack ability, you can be Black Canary. Symbiotic attachment. This allows the mutant to link with the nervous system of another creature. Whoa. Taller, total carapace, so you're like a lobster dude. Ultravision, weight decrease, wings. I love the art in this is really, really fun. And I love the line work. It's just brilliant. You also have mental mutations in this thing. So that's sort of your psionics to some extent, cryokinesis, absorption. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these are duplicated in the psionics in advanced D&D, or at least very similar. Dual brain, you can have two brains. That's awesome. Remember that was a Steve Martin movie, right? The Man with Two Brains. Molecular disruption, molecular understanding, reflection. Just amazing stuff. And it was like a game to some degree. If you played advanced D&D and you weren't like, roll 8 dice and take the 3 best and put them in any order you want and then add 10 points just because you want. It was a game in advanced D&D to try to roll up a ranger or a paladin or a druid or an assassin or a monk because it was really hard to qualify. You had to get really lucky. And that was fun. But in this one, every single character you roll up is sort of an adventure. Who knows what you're going to end up getting? Time field manipulation. That's pretty potent type stuff, especially, if you're creative in how you're going to use this stuff. Weather manipulation, you can be Storm. Think about it. This could also be the foundation of a superhero role-playing game. You could spin this into superhero stuff if you wanted to. You get a special list for plant vegetable mutations. Yes, you could be a giant walking carrot if you wanted to. Carnivorous jaws, contact poison sap, adaptation, aromatic powers, bacterial symbiosis, explosive and or radiated fruit or seeds, throwing explosive pumpkins at people like the Green Goblin, tangle vines, sucker vines, new senses, parasitic attachment, poison vines, saw-edged leaves. Dude, this was just fun. And then the fact of the matter is, when you rolled these things up, very often you'd get something that had a couple really cool things going for it, and then a few things that really, really sucked. And that made it fun. It was part of the game. You sort of embraced your character, by the way. That's gorgeous, man. I just absolutely love that. Here's this dude. He's got his tech equipment going. He's got his ray gun. There's a big plant behind him. But it's Gamma World, so that thing is probably right now thinking about how he's going to, kill this poor dude. You get creating non-player character mutations. Choose a basic animal or plant type. The creature will mutate from 1 to 10 generations. For each generation of an animal mutant, roll once on this percentile table. Roll 1 physical, roll 1 mental, roll 1 physical and 1 mental, heightened intelligence. For each generation that a plant mutates, simply roll 1 mutation on the plant vegetable mutations table. If the creature mutates in a defective manner for the first 2 or 3 generations, it will not be able to survive. So choose another creature and start over. So this is really just for you to populate your world with a bunch of mutant animals. Now, keep in mind, they also are going to give you some monsters you can use that are ready-made for this thing. But it really can't be much simpler, can it? Okay, I'm going to start with a dog. It's 6 generations of this mutant species, and start rolling everything. Now we get to play of the game, time, movement, and turn length. The time scale of a turn in Gamma World varies according to what the players are doing. Turns consist either of route moves, search moves, or combat melee rounds, i.e. melee turns. Route movement is used when the players wish to cover great distances rapidly. Search movement is used when the players are conducting a careful investigation of an area. Combat melee turns are generally used when players encounter hostile beings. So the route movement, one such move represents about 4 hours action in the game. Search movement, what does it say? Does it say how long it takes? Oh, a search move represents 10 seconds of game time. You get the average movement rate. You get how much searching you can actually do. Combat melee rounds last 10 seconds. This is one of those things of old games too. You're going, wait, so search movement and combat melee rounds are the same? Did you really need to call them out? Well, you kind of do, because there's different things you're going to be doing movement-wise in a melee round than when you're searching some old military base. Dude, here's another. I love that dude. I love that dude. That face. Let me, here we go. I got my magnifying glass handy. See if we can zoom in on that guy a little bit. Knocking the bird dudes down as he bashes open the door. Maybe he's got some heightened strength going. So fun. So very fun. We get the combat rules here. Combat melee. Once the referee has determined who starts the combat melee, see surprise first strike. The attackers, those with the first strike option, announce their attacks. This announcement is made by each individual player, or if non-player characters or creatures are the attackers. This announcement is made by the referee. You get the idea. Here's our surprise first strike. A condition of surprise may exist when player characters and non-player characters or beings were unaware of each other's presence prior to the encounter. Makes perfect sense. Physical combat refers to all combat not involving mental mutation powers. Striking with a sword or knife, firing a pistol, throwing a grenade, launching a missile using quills or spines, making a sonic attack, etc. is all part of that. The results of each half melee round of physical combat in Gamma World are determined by 2 dice rolls. One to determine if the target is hit, and one, if the target was hit, to determine the damage done. And of course, you're going to use the appropriate attack matrix for that. We love matrices in these old games. Mental combat is much the same as physical, except that mental forces are used instead of physical strength and weapons. There's a mental attack matrix that you're going to use for that. Special combat rules, so it's going to apply to certain mutants and stuff like that. Combat with robotic units. Robotic units are armed with a variety of technological devices that may be used as weapons, i.e. a laser drill could be quite effective at close range against an unarmored or lightly armored man, and may be designed specifically for combat. So then we get armor class, very much like we have in Dungeons and Dragons, of course. This is descending, so an AC of 10 is no protection. An armor class of 1 is powered attack and assault armors. For a description, see artifacts and equipment section. So no protection, shield only, furs or skins and shield. Cured hide or plant fiber armor, partial carapace, sheath and piece metal armors, total carapace, powered plate and plastic armors. Think of like the stormtroopers probably have a plastic armor. Powered alloy, energized inertia, powered scout, and battle armors, etc. Okay, so all sorts of cool stuff there. We got weapon classes too. Weapon classes. Okay, yeah. See, that's the thing, because what you don't really have in Gamma World, like I said, you don't have classes, and you also don't have levels. So your ability to attack is based upon the kind of weapon that you're using versus the armor you're hitting. Now, Strength bonuses can apply. There are other modifiers that can apply. So the weapon class table, starting at 1 with clubs, hammers, lances, maces, and spears, moving up. By 4, you get to vibro daggers, 6, stun whip, 7, robotic tentacles, grenades and javelins are at 8. The needler, it's a kind of gun basically, is at 11. Up at 16, fusion rifle, micro missile, or mini missiles. Oh, yeah. And sometimes those things are being aimed at you. It's not you. It's not you that's always shooting off those things. You can run into some pretty nasty robots that have those things. So here's your physical attack matrix right up here. Target's armor class versus attacker's weapons class. It's the number you need to hit. And here's attacks by plant or animal mutations without weapons. And that's based on the number of hit dice that the creature has. And here's your mental attack matrix. Attacker's mental strength versus defender's mental strength and the number that you need to hit. Pretty easy stuff. Here's your damage table. Not super different from D&D with these weapons, right? Arrows, crossbow bolts, two-handed swords, pretty much the same. And you get the man-sized or smaller opponents and the larger opponents. So, if you're attacking a brontosaurus, your two-handed sword is going to do more damage against it. I've always thought that's kind of weird and not necessarily needed. Like, why are you giving these monsters more hit dice if you're just taking away their hit points quicker? Although in some cases the weapons do less, but there it is. Fatigue. During extended combat, the players and referee must consider fatigue depending on the weapons, armor, and strengths of the combatants. Fatigue may become noticeable as early as the 11th melee turn or as late as the 18th. The following table cross-indexes the weapon and armor with the length of fighting time. The results are called the fatigue factor and are subtracted from the attacker's weapon class when using the attack matrix. So that's very interesting. D&D doesn't really do that, right? It's just sort of your hit points roll down and then all of a sudden you're dead. And I've talked in some of these how that actually is meant to work. It's not as unrealistic as some people make it out to be. But here fatigue comes into it. So if you're using, say, a two-handed sword, by the 11th round, you're attacking at -1, then -2, etc. So that's interesting and gives you reasons to hold different kinds of weapons and sometimes to change them out. And also based on your armor class. So if you are super heavily armored and you're swinging a two-handed sword, it's going to really catch up with you at a certain point. We have morale checks, much like D&D. We talk about encounters here. And by the way, come on. Some beautiful stuff by Trampier here. The mutant bunnies with the rifles. This is stuck in my mind ever since I first read this book. In some ways, Gamma World had a bigger impact on me than Dungeons & Dragons did, to be completely honest. Because I'd seen Thundarr the Barbarian at the point that I first found this. Because Gamma I would have probably been introduced to when I was about 12 or 13. And I was much younger when Thundarr was rolling around. I was too young. I hadn't seen like Mad Max movies and things like that. But getting a hold of this was just like, oh my God, it's Thundarr brought to life. This is rad. Okay, so we have encounter tables here, different kinds of terrain, and you roll a dice and see what might show up. Let's say we roll a 10. If we're in a clear area, we find a hopper. What's a hopper? Well, we'll talk about that in a second. In the mountains, we find an android. In the forest, an arn. In the desert, a kep. In the water areas, a barl nep. In ruins, a tribesman. And in radioactive zones, a cryptic alliance. Ooh, you don't want to meet up with one of those necessarily. So this is where we get our monster section. So again, one of the things I love about these old games is look at this stat block. Number appearing, armor class, movement, hit dice. That's pretty much it. And anything else you need, you're going to find in the description. And you can see the descriptions are not all that big. And what do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 monsters on these 2 pages, which in a modern day game would probably take up about 20 pages of a book, if not more. So what are some of these monsters? We're not going to read all of them, but you have, for example, here's your androids. Androids look like pure strain humans, so they look like humans, but they're really robots. The Ark, intelligent dogmen. Arns are mutated insects, sometimes used as riding mounts or beasts of burden. That's very cool. Batters are highly intelligent mutated badgeroid species. Look, game's written by people from Wisconsin. You got to have badgers in there. The Barl Nep, I think, is based off of like a intelligent catfish of some kind. The Burlep, here's a good one. The Brutors, standing well over 2 meters high at the shoulder. A Brutors is powerfully muscled and very broad. These Neopercherons, i.e. mutated horses, are quite intelligent with a mental strength of 12 and are particularly partial to pure strain human individuals. In addition to the great size, strength, and intelligence, the Brutors species is remarkably agile for their bulk, and all have precognition. In combat, these creatures can deliver stunning kicks, 2 dice of damage per forehoof, or a vicious bite for 3 dice of damage. Well fed and treated with respect, the Brutors is quite willing to serve as a mount for humans and humanoids. But notice, not for mutated animals. They ain't having none of that. The Centistede is like a horse with multiple legs. The Crep plant, the Urt. This innocuous-looking fish, which can be up to 1 meter long, lives in swift-flowing mountain streams. It has an awesome defense mechanism. Any creature it manages to bite has a chance of being turned to granite-like rock. Treat as a poison attack of intensity 12. A D result turns the victim to stone. Okay, so we got all sorts of cool different animals. I mentioned earlier the hopper. What do you think the hopper might be? Resembling giant, weird-looking hares. In other words, the pictures we saw. They're commonly... Oh, no, I'm wrong about that. I'm wrong about that. Hold on. The hoppers are commonly used as riding beasts, as each is able to carry 100... Oh, dude. That's right, man. You could ride friggin' giant rabbits in this game. God, man, you have a laser gun. You're riding giant rabbits. Who knows what you're fighting? I think the rabbit guys are in here somewhere, though. But, the beauty is, if they're not, you could create them very, very easily. See, the little book is coming apart a little bit here. So anyway, and there's some kind of big dude. What is that? Is that the Zeeth? No, that's a grass. Zarn? No. Yexel. Oh, that's probably a Yexel. Yeah, that'd be my guess. You then get the cryptic alliances. So these are not necessarily the factions that destroyed the world, although maybe some of them descended from that. But they are these cryptic alliances that can be found all over Gamma World, although they have bases of operations, and they're fighting over territory. You don't have alignment in this game, but you can be part of a cryptic alliance, potentially. You have the Brotherhood of Thought, founded by a biochemist who survived the Holocaust and was amazed to find that non-human mutations often had brains of quality equal to or greater than humans. He gathered a small group of followers, and their goals were to unify all intelligent creatures in a world of enlightened coexistence and freedom of choice. Ah, that's nice. The Seekers are a group of humans and mutants that all appear completely human. They travel and work in large populated areas, trying to get humans and mutants of all types to work together. They consider mutated animals to be inferior. Knights of Genetic Purity, those are like the bad guys. They're the pure strain humans who want to get rid of all the mutants. The Friends of Entropy, calling themselves the Red Death. Their goal is to bring about the extinction of all life and the cessation of all mechanical operations. So chaotic evil, in other words. The Iron Society is a group of human mutants bent on the destruction of all non-mutated, pure strain humans. Oh yeah, it goes both ways. It goes both ways. You got the Zoopremicists, who are mutated animals who think they're superior. Healers, restorationists, the followers of the voice. They worship computers. Awesome. The Ranks of the Fit. I do remember that. And these guys, they're like founded by an enormous mutated bear who wrote the organization's guidelines after reading certain history books and possibly Mein Kampf, Animal Farm, and several biographies of Napoleon Bonaparte. They seek to establish a form of Code Napoleon through the world. The archivists, the radioactivists, they worship a radiation god, kind of reminds you of the mutants in Beneath the Planet of the Apes. The Created, that is open to androids. So you get a think about it. It's just, it takes like a page and a half, or maybe with the picture, it would come out to about, maybe a page and a half, maybe a full page. I love how concise this stuff is. It gives you a lot of room to explore and to make these things your own rather than locking you into something. Hazards, you get your poison matrix here, your chances of survival, etc. I think it's actually your constitution versus the strength of the poison. Each numerical intensity poison has its own specific antidote. Let's see. Both are measured in terms of intensity. Okay. The number obtained indicates how many dice of damage the poison victim sustains. The star indicates no effect. The D indicates the victim dies or is paralyzed if the poison is paralytic. Oh, and I should have brought up earlier, you have to excuse me because, well, it's been a while. And in addition, where's the Constitution? I still have D&D in the brain. Your Constitution is what determines your hit points in this game, okay? So you basically roll a number of 6-sided dice equal to the Constitution rating. Okay, so I talked about how stuff can be more dangerous in this game, right, than in D&D. You also have a lot more hit points when you start out. So you can take a lot more damage before your guy is out, which is pretty cool, which is why, if you take 3 dice of damage from a poison, it doesn't necessarily mean the end of your character, although it ain't going to help. There's also a radiation matrix. The number obtained indicates how many dice of damage the radiation victim sustains. M indicates the victim has received a new mutation. D indicates the victim has a 20% chance of receiving a mutational effect, determined randomly, and an 80% chance of death. Ooh, not good. But see, to me, for a game like this, that is maybe a little bit more gonzo, you got to have this. The idea that you're going and you're exploring and you open this door and radiation pours out and maybe one dude doesn't make it, maybe another couple are injured, but then, a couple of the characters suddenly get new mutations. And think if one of them is a pure strain human, what that's going to mean, especially if he had some ties to a group, that doesn't like mutants, and all of a sudden he's a mutant. That makes for a fun game. You don't need plot when you have stuff like this. The plot will sort of wind its way out on its own. You next get a section on artifacts and equipment. This is basically, technology. And again, some of it is higher technology than we have. There are different pistols, the slug thrower, the needler, the stun ray, laser pistol, Mark V blaster, black ray gun, rifles similar, energy weapons, vibro dagger, vibro blade, energy mace, stun whip, grenades, bombs or missiles. Yeah, there's a neutron bomb in there. A neutron bomb? Yeah, there's a neutron bomb. Like I said, there's a high level of danger you can run into in this thing. You get miscellaneous energy devices, like solar energy cells or an energy cloak, medical equipment, armor of different kinds, some of it being powered. And obviously, if it's powered, you got to have power. So you're going to need things like, batteries and atomic energy cells. There are vehicles. There are robotic units. A lot of cool stuff that you might run into in this game. And you also have to determine the artifact condition. So if it comes from ancient times, which for this game would be like 100 years earlier, some of the stuff's not going to work. If it's, you roll a dice, obviously broken, 0% chance of functioning, right? Perfect is 100. So in between, poor, fair, good, excellent. So it doesn't necessarily work. Now here is one of my favorite things in Gamma World. This looks complicated. It's not really that complicated. This is how you figure out how to use one of the artifacts that you find. Okay? So Chart A covers pistols, rifles, energy weapons, grenades, bombs, missiles, defensive armor. Okay, you get the idea. Certain things more complicated, it's a little bit tougher. So with all of these things, you have a starting position, right? Which is this right here, S for start, okay? And you're going to be rolling dice, okay? And you're going to be trying to get to F, the finish. But notice the little skull and crossbones here? Oh, yeah. So you're rolling a 10-sided dice, right? You roll an 8 to 10, you're right back where you started from. A 1 to 7, you make it over to here. Great, okay. Now on a 1 to 5, make it to the next one. That's awesome. 6 or 7, you have to roll again. 8 to 10, you're up here where you can get kind of trapped. I mean, that's a 3 to 10. So you get here, you're going to be confused, okay. You get to this square, you might end up down here. And that's going to lead here, or returning you to square A. So it's kind of a little game that you play for whether or not you can figure out how this stuff works, okay? It says here, 5 rolls on any of the above charts requires that the player do nothing else but concentrate on and manipulate the artifact for 1 hour. Each additional player concentrating adds 1 die roll per hour. Players may spend as much time as they wish trying to figure out artifacts, but if a session is interrupted or stopped for some reason, the player must begin again at start. Players with very high or low intelligence and certain mutations are given minuses or allowed pluses on the dice rolls. All right. If a result calls for harm, or if a player discovers the use of an artifact and tries it out, the referee must roll percentile dice according to the artifact's chance of functioning to see whether anything happens. It is possible to determine the use of an artifact even if it does not work because of its condition. The referee must roll percentile dice again. If it is possible for the artifact to short out or explode, it does so on a result of 1 to 10, causing damage to be determined by the referee. Otherwise, no harm comes to anyone. So it's a whole little mini game when you find these things. And then, of course, we get all of our descriptions. Really rad, ray gun there. But it gives you the range, the damage, etc. Here's your bombs and missiles, different armor, miscellaneous energy devices. You get the idea of all that. Love this dude. What did they use? Was it the Donar? The Donar? I'm trying to think of the coinage they used in this game. Or maybe it was Dolar. Anyways. Standard devices, units, and materials. So they use some of the main building computers, hall monitors, comm units, computer terminals, radioactive materials. Okay, so trade value and exchange. Oh, Domars, it's right in front of my face. During the course of a campaign, adventurers may wish to dispose of articles found during their explorations or trade for items they require but have not found. The most common way to handle this need is to allow trading at larger population settlements in the world. Much of the trading is left to the referee's discretion. However, the following guidelines for trade values and availability of items are suggested, and it gives it to you in Domars, which is this sort of coin, right? And gold, all right? Working artifacts from ancient times are rare and highly prized. It will usually be impossible to purchase them. In other words, got to go out and find the treasure yourself. Values given on the trade table are in Domars and gold. The Domar was the basic monetary unit of the world before the Holocaust. It is a small, lightweight coin inlaid with colors and symbols denoting various denominations and nearly indestructible. Since the nature of the Domar makes it impossible to counterfeit, it is still used widely as a means of exchange. However, since it is possible that the ruins of an ancient bank may be found in the wilderness, there is the possibility of new Domars being released into the economy of a settlement by adventurers. Because this new influx could destroy the value of a settlement's trade goods, merchants will prefer gold, other precious metals, and gemstones for large purchases. Sorry about that. I almost said purposes. At least I didn't say porpoises. We have here, so this is kind of covering a few things. We have healing of body damage, right? 1 hit point per day of rest, which means you got a lot of hit points, but it may take you a while to heal if you've taken a lot of damage. Something to think about in a campaign. Relatives, in other words, who gets your stuff if you go bye-bye. Languages, because so many of the mutants of Gamma World use telepathy and so few pure strain humans are left, a common language has evolved among all speaking beings and creatures. In other words, we don't want to spend too much time with that. Dude, come on. How rad is that? And Here's one of your vibro type swords, right? Thundarr the Barbarian. It looks like a laser sword. You get a whole bunch here on robotic units and how those work. Robotic unit design checklist. So that's going to help you design these things. There are common robotic units that you can use. That's a really cool insect. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be a robot, but it might be. The Borgs, the permanent cybernetic installation, and the think tank are special cases. Borgs, oh boy. And so they give you the robot stats right here for the different ones of those. This dude, I believe, is the Death Machine. The Death Machine for Gamma World is sort of like the Tarrasque for D&D or Advanced D&D. You don't want to run into one of those. It's going to just plain wipe you out. Okay. This is interesting here. Here's your experience points required for a bonus. So you don't really have levels in this thing. But as you go up and get experience points at 3, at 6, at 12, at 25, 50, etc., right? You get to make a dice roll on this chart to see how your character improves. +1 point to mental strength, +1 point to constitution, +1 to dexterity. You get the idea. +1 on all to hit rolls in physical combat. +1 point per die of damage inflicted by non-energy weapon employed. So it's a way for your character to advance without having to have levels and different level abilities and all of that jazz. And it gives you experience point values for different, tech that you can find. You get an example of play here, little sample world design. Love this friggin' map. It's so cool. I know I'm a nerd, but I like the way the trees look. And as a kid, you just like, I want to figure out how to do that. How do I draw this stuff? And you just frankly didn't know. You notice on this one, here's the territory of the Supremacists. Oh, I'm sorry, the Supremists. I was getting them wrong. The Supremists. Here's the Archivists have some kind of a village or something. There's a military base over here, etc. Here's a little map of the military base, the compound. Gives you some stuff on starting a campaign. Gives you an example of a referee moderating. They always gave you that stuff back in the old days because, frankly, you just wouldn't know otherwise. You had to have that. Here's the credits. Game design, James M. Ward and Gary Jaquet. Editing, Tom Wham, Timothy Jones, Mike Carr, and Brian Bloom. Valuable assistance, E. Gary Gygax. Cover art, David A. Trampier, or Tramp for short. Interior art, Tramp, and David C. Sutherland III. Any questions on these rules should be addressed to Gamma World Questions, TSR Hobbies Incorporated, Post Office Box 756, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, 53147. Enclose a self-addressed stamp envelope. Think about that. There was a time, when you would have to send a self-addressed stamp envelope to them with your question so they could give you the answer back. And we would now do email, whatever, just online. So as I said, this is something I bought a while back. Somebody in the notes wrote down a character that they had not the greatest penmanship in the world, or I should maybe say pencilmanship in the world, but I love that kind of stuff in these books. I know it reduces the value. I don't care. I love that kind of stuff. And here we got your basic tables that you're going to need when you're playing, so you can find them all a lot easier than having to go all the way through. And here's all the different monsters with the quick info on what you need to play them. Clear desert terrain. They have the different kind of terrains, mountain or forest, etc. It's based, and you got the percentages, so you can use it as an encounter table. The treasure list, I love this little treasure list at the back, because this is stuff that is not like fusion rifles and all that crap. We're talking ballpoint pen in good condition, pencil sharpener, good condition, pocket color television, fair condition, no batteries, an attaché case, poor conditions, locks rusted shut, contains insurance papers. There's a marble lion head, a plastic crate, a bicycle, poor condition, tires flattened, rotted, frame bent. But maybe, just maybe, you could fix it. A jungle gym. Does anybody even say jungle gym anymore? A mama doll. Mama. Dog whistles. adjustable wrenches, and now adjustable wrench in an excellent condition. That'd be pretty awesome. This one got me here. What is this? Number 303 can of Martian Snovel regeneration grass. Looks and smells like rot. Any creature brave enough to consume this rolls die 10. 1 to 5, no effect. 6 to 9, add 2 points to Constitution, and 2 die 6 to total hit points. 10, lose 2 points from Constitution, subtract 2 die 6 from total hit points. All effects are permanent. Only 1 dose per character. A brass nameplate. Solid duralloy scale model of the starship Savage Dictator on 0.6 meter by 0.3 meter by 6 centimeter walnut base. Okay. You also get a product list for TSR. Gamma World. An incredibly fun game. Played it a bunch with a friend of mine. It was just so nuts. You could almost do anything you wanted with it. But here's the other cool thing about Gamma World. In the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide, yeah, this is the one that I had as a kid and still do have. If you go to page 113, I marked it, but there we go. If you go to page 113 of the book, under the ongoing campaign, you get some rules for 6 guns and sorcery, that is, crossing D&D with Boot Hill, and mutants and magic. So you can cross, well, not only Gamma World, but Metamorphosis Alpha with Dungeons and Dragons. It gives you the basics on character abilities. Strength is compared to physical strength. Magic resistance, none. Radiation resistance, none. What you would have if you went into one of those worlds. But it basically gives you the conversion. So if you wanted to have your D&D characters go into the Gamma World, you could do that. If you wanted to, vice versa, you could do that as well. Gives you all the stuff you need to do that. But it also means that if you really need to port stuff over, you can do that as well. So a really cool addition, and one that we always wanted to use. And if I'm honest, we probably never really did. And when I was a kid, you never had campaigns last quite long enough to do that. So, Gamma World, Metamorphosis Alpha, etc. A really, really, really fun game. If you've never played, you should give it a look. Now, there were editions that came out after this one. Some of them were more complicated. Some, I think, were backward compatible, and I think some of them may not have been. But this is such a rules-light, simple game. Such a simple game. You can do a lot with it. And that 3 die 6, or the ability scores, means it works pretty well with D&D. It would probably also work pretty well with that Star Trek game that I talked about a while back on this channel. So you want to have Kirk and company show up on a mutant world. You can probably convert the two pretty darn easily. Really fun stuff. You should give it a look if you've never checked it out before. That'll wrap it up for this video, for this little flip through retrospective and review of Gamma World by James Ward and Gary Jaquet. Check them out, man. It's really cool. I think you will enjoy it. If you have some Gamma World memories, if you have any questions, throw them in the comments. I'd be happy to answer them for you. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe, share with a friend. That would be very cool. In the meantime, God bless everyone. Please be kind to one another. Have a little bit of fun out there. Play a little Gamma World if you haven't recently. Or, if you have, keep on playing. And I will see you again hopefully soon in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.